We continue now at the top of Daf Kuf Samech Amud Aleph in Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 168a. On the previous summit, there was an incident where a husband, he brought a shover, a receipt to Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, and the shover proved that he had paid off his ksuba. And the wife, she said that really this did not come from her. There was another woman who was impersonating her, and she was the one that actually gave the shover to the husband. And Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba said, initially when you came in, I really thought it was a different woman, because Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba was one of the people who signed the shover. So he said, I really did think that it was a different woman, but now they tell me that really you've just aged, and your voice has changed, and you're actually the same woman, and now I do think you are the same woman that came before us, and therefore this shover is acceptable. And Abaye now says, even though generally we say, Kevan Shehigid, Shuv Eino Chozer Umagid, once a person testifies, he can't change his testimony. And so therefore over here, Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba initially said that this was not the woman, so maybe he can't change and say that this was the correct woman. But Abaye says, Tzurba me Rabbanan, when it comes to a Torah scholar, Lav Orche Lameidak, he's not the kind of person who's going to check exactly what the woman looks like, and therefore he is allowed to change his testimony, and we do believe that this was the woman, and she gave the shover to her husband. We believe the shover is in fact effective. And the Rashbam explains, Tzurba me Rabbanan, Talmud Chacham, Kagon Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, someone like Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, Lav Darche Lameidak Ulahakir Benoshim Kolkach, he's not the kind of person who's going to know exactly so much about women. V'hagoda Kamaisa Sha'amar, so therefore when he first said, the Lav Ihi, that this was not the woman, that there was an impersonator, Lav Klumhi, that's nothing, we can ignore it. V'lo Mikri Chozer Umagid, and that's not called retestifying. B'amesh Amar Levasof Ati, when he says at the end, it really was you. Elashin Ishtana Kolach, but your voice changed. Dikevan Damar Hashta Dikdak Diyofa, since now he's saying that now I have checked, and I've checked well, so then we rely on him and we trust what he is saying, and again the shover is considered good. And the Gemara continues, there was a shover, again the Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba had signed, again the woman said to him, Lava no havoy, that wasn't me, there was an impersonator. Amar lo, he said to her, Ivra antabas, he said, no, it's true that it really was you, I know that it was you. Amar Abaye says, Afagav de tzurba me rabbanan lav orche lemeidak, even though generally Talmud Chacham is not so careful in terms of the appearance of the women, kevan de duck, but if he says that he was careful, if he says he knows, then we trust that he does know. And the Gemara continues, Amar Abaye says, Hai tzurba me rabbanan, this Torah scholar, da'azal l'kedusha itasa, who's going to be mekadesh a woman, Nidbar am ha'aretz b'hadei, he should take with him an am ha'aretz, he should take with him a common person, dilma mechalfu laminei, because maybe they'll switch the woman and he won't recognize it, but the am ha'aretz will, and that way they will not take advantage of him. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, the Mishnah said, Habal nosein schar v'chulu, it said that the husband is the one that pays for the writing of the get. The Gemara says, my time, and what's the reason for that? The Amar Krutz, because the Pasuk says, v'chasa v'nosan, that he writes it and he gives it. The Pasuk indicates that the husband is the one that should be writing the get. And the Gemara comments, but nowadays the law of dinan hachi, nowadays we don't do this. We have the woman, she's the one that pays for the writing of the get. The reason for that is shadiyuhu rabbanan aisha, the rabbanan say that the woman should pay, ki hechi delo l'shaya, that way the husband won't delay. The husband won't delay in paying for the get, and therefore it's going to delay the divorce. In order to avoid that, we have the woman, she pays for the writing of the get. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Kosvin shtar lelova afal pishein malva imo v'chulu. It said, we write a shtar for the borrower, even though the malva is not with him, and it is the borrower who pays for the writing of the document. And the Gemara says, pshit, that's obvious. Of course, the borrower is the one that's benefiting. He's borrowing the money. He should pay to write the document. And the Gemara answers, lo, no, tzricha, it's necessary, be'iska. We're talking about a joint venture. By a joint venture, the lender also takes some of the profits, so he does have some gain. Nevertheless, it's the borrower who pays for the writing of the document. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Kosvin shtar lemocher afal pishein lokeach v'chulu. We write a document for the mocher, for the seller of property, even though the buyer is not there, and it is the buyer who's the one who pays for the writing of the document. And the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't it obvious? The buyer is the one that's acquiring the land. Of course he should pay. And the Gemara says, Lo no tzrich, it's necessary, b'mocher sadeum mipnei ra'asa. We're talking about someone who's selling his field because it's a bad field. He's anxious to get rid of the field, so maybe he should pay for the document. And instead, the Mishnah says, it's the buyer who pays for the writing of the document. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Ein kosvin shtare erisin v'chulu, and the Mishnah went on to say that it is the groom who pays for the writing of these documents, the documents of erisin and the documents of marriage. And the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't it obvious that it's the groom who pays for the writing of the documents? He is acquiring, so to speak, the woman. And the Gemara says, Lo no tzrich, it's necessary, da'afilu tzurva me rabbanan, even if he's a Torah scholar, d'nichalei l'chamua l'karuve, that the father-in-law wants to bring him into the family, it's to the father-in-law's benefit, because this is a Torah scholar that's marrying his daughter. Maybe therefore it's the bride's side who should pay for the writing of the document, and the Mishnah teaches no, the groom has to pay for the writing of the document. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "Ein kosvin shtar arisos v'kavlonis v'chulu." We don't write a document of arisos, which is a sharecropper. Kavlonis is a tenant farmer, unless it's midah shneim with the consent of both of them, and it's the sharecropper or the tenant farmer that pays for the writing of the document. And the Gemara says, "Pshita." Again, it's obvious. It's the sharecropper or the tenant farmer. They're the ones that are trying to get certain rights to the field. Of course, they write the document. And the Gemara says, "Lo no tzrich." It's necessary. Babura. We're talking about a field that is going to be left fallow. It's not going to grow anything. So in such a situation where they're not really getting anything, maybe it is really the owner of the land who should be writing the document. Again, the Mishnah says that it's written by the sharecropper or the tenant farmer. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "In kosvin shtore beirurin elamidah shneim shtore beirurin." They're only written with the consent of both parties. And the Gemara says, "My shtore beirurin." What is this shtore beirurin? And the Gemara explains, "Hacha targimu shtore tanasa." Here they explain that it's documents which detail the claims of each party. Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba says, "Zeh borer lo echad, v'zeh borer lo echad." There's a process of choosing judges. Each litigant chooses a judge, and then those two judges, they choose a third judge. So it's the documents in terms of the choosing of the judges. That is what shtore beirurin are. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, "L'shneim kosvin." When it comes to shtore beirurin, it's not that they both share the cost of writing up these documents, but you actually write separate documents for each litigant. Shnaim, you write two documents, lazeh bi'atzmo v'lazeh bi'atzmo. You have one document for this party, the other document for that party, and each party, each litigant, pays for his own document according to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. And the Gemara says, "Lema bekofin al midas stom kamiflagi." Let us say that the Tanakam and Rav Shimon ben Gamliel in the Mishnah, they're arguing about kofin al midas stom. When a person is selfish, do we force a person not to be selfish? Do we force a person not to act like those residents of Stone? The Mar Savar kofin, one says we do force, Umar Savar ein kofin, the other one says we don't force. And the idea over here would be, let's say one of the litigants says, "I don't want to share in the cost of the documents with the other litigant. I want to pay for my document, and he should pay for his document." That's like a midas stom. So initially, the Gemara is suggesting that's the machlokus between the Tanakam and Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, if that's what he wants to do, that's what we do. We have separate documents. The Tanakam says, no, we force them to share the document. Why should he be allowed to be selfish? Why should he be allowed to say that he wants his own document and the other one has to pay fully for his document? We don't allow that according to the Tanakama. And the Gemara says, lo, no, that's not the machlokus in the Mishnah. Rather, the kuli alma kofin, everybody would agree that we force a person not to be selfish. That's not a reason to write separate documents. But here, what's the reason of Rav Shimon ben Gamliel? His reason is, do amar le, because he says to him, one litigant says to the other, lo nichali detavi zechusach gabi zechusi. I don't want that your claims should be by my claims. The damis alaki arya arba. You to me, you're like a lion that ambushes. We're like enemies. Why should we join together in writing up the various claims in one document? I want my own document, and you should have your own document. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Misha para mixas chovo. Let's say somebody pays up part of his debt. The lova pays the malva some of what he owes. V'hishlish eshtaro. And then what they do is, he gives the document, the shtar, to a third party. That way the malva won't have the document and try to collect the entire thing. And he tells that third party, V'yamarlo, he says to him, Imlo nasati loch mikan v'ad yom ploni. If I don't pay it until this certain deadline, tein lo shtaro, then you can give the malva back his shtar and he can collect the entire thing. Now he thinks, of course, he's going to pay it all up by the deadline, but he gias man velonasan, but the deadline comes and he doesn't pay. So it's a machlokes tanoim. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says yitain, Rabbi Yossi says he can give it to the malva. The malva can now collect everything. Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo yitain. Rabbi Yehuda says he cannot give the document to the malva. The malva is not allowed to collect the entire debt because that is not what is owed. And the Gemara says b'mai komiflagi. What exactly are Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda arguing about? And the Gemara explains Rabbi Yossi savar asmachta kanya. Rabbi Yossi says asmachta is effective. This is an asmachta, because what the lova is saying is, the lova is saying, if I don't pay by the deadline, give it to the malva, so the malva can collect everything. But the lova really thinks he's going to pay by the deadline. He's not really undertaking that obligation. That's not what's really in his mind. And Rabbi Yossi says, nevertheless, even though it was conditional and he really thought he would make the deadline, but asmachta kanyan, asmachta is binding, the agreement is binding, and therefore the third party does in fact give the document back to the lender. Rabbi Yehuda savar, but Rabbi Yehuda holds asmachta lo kanyan. Asmachta is not binding. He he obviously thought he would pay by the deadline, and so therefore it's not binding, and that shtar is not going to be given back to the lender, according to Rabbi Yehuda. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Baravu, Amar Rav. Rav Nachman says that Rav Baravu says that Rav says, Halacha Rabbi Yossi, the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, that asmach is kanya, and therefore the document is given to the lender. Kiyasu l'kami de Rabbi Ami, when they came before Rabbi Ami for a ruling on this, Amar Lui said to them, V'chi me'achash Rabbi Yochanan melamdeinu pam rishonu shniya. If Rabbi Yochanan already told us one time he taught us, and the second time he taught us, halacha Rabbi Yossi, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, that the asmachta is effective. Ani ma'esa, what am I going to do? Of course, we have to rule like Rabbi Yossi. But the Gemara comments it's not true. V'yein halacha Rabbi Yossi, the halacha in fact is not like Rabbi Yossi. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Misha Nimchak Shtar Chov, if somebody's Shtar Chov was erased, and now the creditor has a problem of collecting his debt, Ma'amid Olav Edim, you bring witnesses, Ubolif Ne Bezin, and he comes before Bezin with the witnesses, Viosin Lokiyum, and they ratify it. They say as follows, Ish Ploni Ben Ploni, so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, Nimchak Shtaro, his Shtar was erased, Biyom Ploni, the Shtar was written on this particular day, it had these particular details, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Kuf Sameches Amid Beis.